You are listening to Talking Star Wars.
Hello, Star Wars fans. I'm Alex,
I'm Connor.
and this is episode 82, where we discuss the currently released audio dramas that are part of the Star Wars canon.
So, for those of us not in the know, an audio drama, I would assume, would be much like an audio book. But what's the distinction between the two?
So, an audio book is a book that has been it's read by one person usually. They might do voices of characters. They might help with some of the sound effects of the narration, but otherwise, it's usually just a reading of the book, so someone can absorb it in auditory form. An audio drama, on the other hand, will often have multiple actors doing characters, and and rather than like reading narration from like an omniscient third-person narrator or from inside a character's head, almost all of the action will take place via dialogue between characters, reading texts. So it's all like in universe, which takes some suspension of disbelief, but so does how people speak in books. So it's just a different
Mhm.
media format. So you'll have sound effects, the sound of blasters and lightsabers. Dramatic conversations between characters is the linchpin of the plot. So that is an audio drama in that it tells a story via soundscape, and it's just designed that way, not an auditory rendition of the text of a book.
Well, nice. It seems like Star Wars would be very well suited to that, just in terms of uh, with Star Wars, it's so much more of an ensemble kind of storytelling, and also you have so many synonymous sound effects that just by hearing them alone, you know that they're from Star Wars. So
Yeah, from the Tie Fighter to the
yeah,
lightsaber to to blaster fire to the Force.
and I know that even back, I believe it was Empire Strikes Back had an audio drama with much of the returning cast. Uh, so there's some history as far as audio dramas in the world of Star Wars, but as far as new canon, once Disney is taken control, what do we have as far as official canon audio dramas?
Yes, as Connor said, there are older audio dramas, original radio dramas, and things. It used to be a much more popular format, but now with the rise of sort of podcasts and on-demand audiobooks, some audio dramas have made a comeback. And today we are going to discuss the three audio dramas that are currently part of the Star Wars canon. There is a fourth one coming out next year, but we'll talk about the three that are currently out. So one of them, the first one, set in the Clone Wars era, but also flashing back to far before, so the prequel era, we'll call it, is Dooku Jedi Lost, which follows multiple narratives layered against each other between Asajj Ventress, Dooku as an apprentice and a Jedi, and then um, Dooku in the modern day with Asajj and how he is as the leader of the Separatist Alliance. Well, the second would be Tempest Runner. The next two audio dramas and the third one are all going to be set in phases one, two, and three, respectively, of the High Republic. And so one per phase has an audio drama, and these have been relatively important to the plot, explaining what happened to key characters or key events. The first one is Tempest Runner, which follows the Lorna D, one of the main antagonists of Phase One, after she is captured under an assumed name and must figure out what she's going to do. And we flash back to see her life that has brought her this far to be a pirate queen and ruthless murderess. And then the third one is the Battle of Jedha, which is set over a 72-hour period on the holy planet of Jedha when a peace conference goes awry after being sabotaged by a cult and a self interested politician and businessman, and the unfortunate machinations of another cult and two warring factions that just despise each other.
So how crucial are these last two installments to the High Republic? Are they necessary as far as like, okay, these are sort of like the capstone events? Are they just major events that take place in each phase?
So I would say of plot relevance of the two in the High Republic, uh, the Battle of Jeddah more important than Tempest Runner. Though Tempest Runner, if you don't listen to it, you're like, what happened to Lorna D? She was a main character, and then she was betrayed here, and then what happened? She was going to go off by herself, and it's like, oh, then she appears in this other book. Now she's back in command of a ship with her own fanatical faction of followers. How did that happen?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, but you can still understand. It's like, okay, she's a charismatic pirate queen. She reforged her forces or whatever. But if you don't understand why the peace conference between Irem and Arano failed, and why Jeddah, why the great statue in Jeddah fell, and why the Jedi are now distrusted by the Force cult of the Path of the Open Hand. You're not. It's very important for Phase Two, this is one of the harder audio dramas to get a hold of because it's more recent, which is a little bit unfortunate. But the Battle of Jedha would be it's sort of the a bridge between Part One and Part Two of Phase Two of the High Republic.
Gotcha. And then with the last phase, we have another audio drama coming up.
Yes, the exact details as of this not yet released. Only knowing that there will be, I believe, Vernestra Rowe will be one of the viewpoint characters, uh, a young Jedi Knight at the time of this audio drama during the events of the High Republic multimedia series, who is seen as a morally questionable Jedi Master at the time of the Acolyte.
So yeah, it'll be good to get some more background on her just to flesh out that inspiration for her character.
Yeah, I believe it might show the transition from idealistic young Jedi to jaded Jedi Master who is willing to make compromises in the name of security and the power of the Order.
Gotcha. So that gives us a brief overview of sort of what we're looking at as far as what each of these three audio dramas delve into. Do you want to get into the plots deeper or discuss the art form in general of having an audio drama as opposed to a more traditional written text?
Yeah, I'd like to analyze each of them as an audio drama. So first, the the one that's the most different, and it was the sort of the first one of its ilk in this canon, was Dooku Jedi Lost. And this one has a framing narrative in that it is told as by from Asajj Ventress's perspective, and she is reading the journals of Count Dooku with his permission because Dooku wants to find his sister, and he's hoping that his journals that he kept about his sister will help Asajj find her for reasons that become clear at the end of the audio drama. So this is the one that and we get narration inside Ventress's head by her in her own voice. We don't get that in other audio dramas where it's sort of it's as it's happening. It's like you are an
Mm-hmm.
observer in the scene. You can't hear what's in characters' heads. You must infer from what they're saying. And this one, because it's we're reading someone's journal and get someone's thoughts about it, we get rumination by Asajj. So we have her internal monologue because the three layered story is we have Dooku's past as a pre-Jedi, and then as a Jedi, and then as a Jedi Master, and then how he falls to become a fallen Jedi. We get then Asajj's past because she keeps seeing the parallels between herself and Dooku, and is haunted by visions of her dead Jedi Master because the dark side is not good for your mental health, everyone. And then we get the modern day where it is Dooku has recently, become leader of the Separatist Order and is seeking out his sister for nefarious purposes. So I like the layered narrative because it sort of interweaves rather nicely the parallels between Dooku and Asajj Ventress, and I also like the world building where we see what is it like when a young child is taken in by the Order, and it's also one of my favorite things because we see flaws in the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
We see them as people, in that Dooku hides things. His best friend is Sifo Dyas, who is a strong prophet in the Force, whose visions become crippling. He engages in some forbidden Force practices with the help of one of his Jedi Masters. For many, many years, he keeps a secret communicator that allows him to speak to his sister back on Sereno, which he's not supposed to keep secret, but does. He is censured for it when it's found and it's confiscated, but he's allowed to stay a Jedi, eventually becomes a respected Jedi Master. And it also shows how Dooku learned Force lightning and that he was always born with the ability. At some point, he, his master, and a friend are captured by a dark Force witch. She attempts to absorb Dooku's essence, and Force lightning blasts from Dooku and kills her, um, revealing that Dooku has the ability, but then his master, um, not his master, because Master Yoda was his direct master, but a Jedi master that he is close with, helps him hide the ability. He never speaks of it again because she thinks they would not understand.
So I know that we've had some insight into Dooku's past before. We've had novels focused on him, and I know that we've had Tales of the Jedi also peer into his past. How well does the continuity line up between these different pieces?
Yeah, so it actually makes Tales of the Jedi make a little bit more sense in that you learn that Dooku, even after leaving the Order, did not immediately become Palpatine's apprentice. He left the Order. He was considered one of the Fallen, or not the Fallen. The Lost is what they called them, but they didn't know he'd fallen to the dark side. In fact, they didn't. They very rarely believed it. It's why when Episode 2 happens, they're like, Dooku, he was a former Jedi. We're still kind of cool with that guy. I mean, he's leading the Separatist Alliance. He's a politician. It's not a great look for us, but like doing evil stuff like that, he was a Jedi Master for many years.
Mhm.
So he's just a misguided politician now. His heart's probably still mostly in the right place. And Yoda was always trying to get him to join the Order again, so it's why he was allowed around. That's why he has to use Sifo Dyas's codes to erase Camino from the archives. He no longer has that access himself. And as you can see, he engineered, he either used Sifo Dyas's name or manipulated his disabled friend into ordering the army, and then arranged his death and took his codes to erase Camino from the archives. It is killing Yaddle that cemented him as Palpatine's apprentice. And you
Mhm.
can see he struggled with that moment. Even at the end of Dooku Jedi Lost, in the past narrative about him, we see him accepting leaving the Jedi Order, in that he topples his brother and seizes control of Sereno as the Count of Sereno. But we don't see him engage in any like terrible dark side practices or declare himself a Sith. But then why we go to the modern day and we see he kills his own sister to consolidate his power. So,
Mhm.
you know, not a great person, and not that we ever pretended that Dooku was, but
And no Darth ever truly is.
yeah. So and then Tales of the Jedi again shows his growing disaffection with the Order. It matches up very nicely. Uh, there's a subplot. I mean, Qui Gon Jinn was his Padawan, and there's a subplot where they're against this crime ring, and we see Qui Gon Jinn respecting Dooku, but and they had non-traditional views of the Force, but then Jinn took it in different directions. Um, so lots of interesting stuff. I would say that Dooku Jedi Lost is the most contemplative, and it covers the most amount of time and ground. Like we see from birth Dooku, and then the years of his life, and we sketch over wide areas where it's very the same. We don't talk a lot about Dooku in his 20s or Dooku in his 50s.
Mhm.
We get the key events of Dooku's life because Ventress is just going through his journals trying to find things that were linchpin moments of his life, up until the modern day where he's a Sith Lord. But we get also a lot of Asajj Ventress's ruminations on what does it mean to fall to the dark side? What does the call of the light mean? Is he still struggle with the dark side? All of that, and so that the framing narrative gives it a lot of gravitas. Of these, it's probably my favorite.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not probably the best as an audio drama because it's probably halfway between an audio drama and a book, uh,
Mhm.
in an audiobook, just because so much of it is just narrated by Ventress, but every individual character is fully voiced with a different cast. So it is still an audio drama, even if it's in a slightly different format.
Mhm. It seems to be where audio dramas seem to exist in, as far as if it's, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if it were meant for the stage, there wouldn't be so much narration, there wouldn't be so much monologue. When it comes to audio dramas, I've heard they've been of things like of Dune or The Hobbits or even one of the unproduced Alien scripts where there is set direction and there is the sense of an internal narration, but uh, much less than your traditional book, but just more so than your traditional play. So that would lead then to Tempest.
Tempest Runner, which is the second highest rank you can achieve as part of the Nihil, one of our antagonists in the later period of the High Republic.
One of our pirates, correct?
Yeah, they're sort of piratical cultist empire builder ravagers. So I mean, they're this powerful faction that have access to secret technology that they first are just like raiders, but then quickly are forged by Marchion Ro into a cult of and sort of army. But they definitely start out as just a ruthless pirate gang that are uncommonly effective due to their access to secret technology. And Lorna D is one of the three Tempest runners at the when the Nihil are introduced, and she is known to be the most egotistical of them, one of the most effective of them, a survivor. She is a Twi'lek woman who has sharpened her teeth in the male style. And her ship is also called the Lorna D, because she can think of no better name than her own to name something. And she's cold. She betrays one of the other Tempest Runners in the first book she's introduced because he's not of no use to her, and escapes an assassination attempt or uh, neutralization attempt by the Jedi. They would like to capture her, but if she dies, she kind of helped kill the population of most of the planet. So the Republic at that point is not interested in playing games with Lorna D. But the audio drama, so we have that background of her as this powerful pirate queen. But then the Jedi do respond to the threat of the Nihil, and they're threatened. And this, with a raid gone bad, Lorna D is captured, but they don't know who she is because the Nihil always wear masks, and Lorna never takes hers off around people she does not trust, and around most people she trusts, but she doesn't really trust anybody. So no one really knows what she looks like, other than some people don't even know she's a Twi'lek. So it's just her name. So she's able to hide as a Twi'lek prisoner under another name on a Republic prison vessel. And so then the narrative is half, is Lorna legitimately seeking redemption along with this prison warden that realizes who she is but wants to redeem her? And then we get the narration of her past of how does someone get to be like a cold sociopath like Lorna D? And turns out you had some childhood trauma, some foiled expectations, a deep sense of personal injustice that consumes the whole world. So we see all the places like she actually had she was part of a royal family of a Twi'lek colony, and when a coup happened because her boyfriend manipulated her and sold her into slavery, she took it kind of personally. And even though Jedi rescued her and the Jedi Master Oppo Rancis tried to help her, come to peace with it and gave her a position as an ensign and a trainee at a military academy, she then went AWOL from the military academy and started her own and joined the Nihil. And by the end of the audio drama, you realize that she's pursuing redemption, and she does decide that the Nihil are, that she doesn't want to be beholden to Marchion Ro, but she does become a Tempest Runner again, seizes a new ship, names it the Lorna D, elevates a bunch of her fellow prisoners to powerful roles, and becomes kind of her own faction.
So interesting. I did not hear the word Jedi once in
No.
that description.
Oh no, she was at one point when she was enslaved. She was rescued by Jedi.
Ah, there we go. So
And the Jedi did try to kill her in the modern day.
mhm.
But
It seems like so much of the High Republic is a view of the Jedi and their, uh, relationship with the galaxy at this point in time.
yeah, I would say there's plenty of the High Republic that is also focused on non-Jedi as well.
And so this seems to be one of those pieces of media. How does it contribute to the High Republic as a whole? Because with something like talking about Dooku, it's one piece of media within an ocean of different representations. With the High Republic, you only have a couple dozen. So how does the audio drama stand up within this phase?
I really like the quality of the um, voice acting in this one. They obviously upped the budget. They got a lot of voice actors. Someone that Lorna thought she'd killed comes back, and like he speaks through a breathalyzer, and he's a little bit hard to understand. They commit to it. They're like, yeah, he's hard to understand. Lorna D almost killed him, and one of his lungs is gone, and all
Mm-hmm.
of that. So you have very distinctive voices for all the characters, and you get a lot more personal drama between various characters. You get invested in some of the more minor characters as well. You're kind of rooting for Lorna by the end because, like, the Republic prison system is not great. It's corrupt, and one of the other inmates is basically Kingpin on the inside. Uh, but then you don't really like the other Nihil, and so we could like the journey of her success, where she assassinated her predecessor. You're like, they kind of had it coming, but then she does like terrible things. So there's not like you're sort of like she's kind of exposing by being sort of this unchanging, relatively terrible person who like flirts with the idea of redemption and then rejects it. Kind of highlights the negativity of the system they're in. The High Republic is not particularly optimistic. Bad shit happens to the Jedi, to the Republic, and to a lot of worlds. And while you might win some victories against the Nihil, they kill a lot of people. And
Mm-hmm.
Lorna D is one of the people doing the killing.
Yeah.
So
So the villain who you hate to love.
yeah, she's kind of despicable, but it
Yeah.
kind of like she's not even that charming. But you see why she is the way that she is. And sometimes when she's opposing people worse than herself, you're like, okay, yeah, he had it coming in. Sometimes she's like, oh no, Lorna, no, don't do that. You had a real chance of redemption, and now what are you doing? Yeah. So yeah, I like the quality of the audio drama. It takes place over the course of I think a few months, taking from Alora's captivity, and then of course the backstory part of her life takes place over the course of years. So it sort of follows a similar pattern to Dooku, Jedi Lost, where we have two competing narratives. The next audio drama does not do that. It is a tight narrative told over the course of 3 days, but I liked the focus on one character and sort of this deep introspection and all the aspects of her life. Even more so than we focused on Dooku, and it was a more unknown character. Like she's not a Jedi. She has become a pirate queen, but she wasn't born into power. She had no particular special power. And how has she achieved her position?
That sounds like a fun exploration within the sandbox that is Star Wars.
And a little bit, I think, the Orange is the New Black in it because
Oh, sure.
she's in a women's prison. You know, not that it's like entirely like there are men at the prison, but primarily she's in the women's area of the prison, and so most of the other characters, other than like the warden, are women. Um, it's not particularly drawn attention to, but it's not like ignored either. Like the Kingpin is also a woman. Um, Various strange alien types. Like one of her other inmates is a mother who wants to get back to her children. So it's very much more realistic in that way than no one's just a cardboard cutout that has suddenly showed up.
Interesting. So then, with this single character drama, moving into a war story that is uh, the Battle of Jedha, what are the differences that we have here? Are we focusing on multiple characters? It's a smaller span of time, but how is this story told differently?
Yeah, so if you think of the previous two audio dramas, those were character driven. And there's two main types of narratives, though we could argue that back and forth. But you have character driven stories and plot driven stories, whereas the first two are explorations of one or more characters and how like their pasts shaped them. The Battle of Jeddah is very plot focused. We have characters and they're interesting, but this is primarily about how does the Battle of Jeddah break out? What do the Jedi do? How did the Path of the Open Hand contribute? What is the Brotherhood of the Ninth Door? All of those things. So it's a great bit of world building. We learn more about Jeddah before it is destroyed by the Empire. All the various Force sects that have a presence there. This is before the Jedi were one of the only Force sects remaining, but we can see the Guardians of the Wills are still around by the time of Rogue One. The Empire did not completely stamp out all Force sects, though he sharply limited them. It was only the Jedi that he completely destroyed. So we have like dozens of different force sensitive groups that are present on Jeddah. And the framing device is in one of the primary uh, conflicts going on in Phase 2 of the High Republic is a war that's been going on for many years between two planets in the same system, Irem and Arano. In one of the books in the High Republic, they're going to sign a peace treaty, so they send representatives to the neutral holy planet of Jeddah, and three different factions are trying to sabotage the peace talks for their own purposes. A wealthy businessman, a cult, and then a force sect for hire.
Interesting. It's fascinating to take this idea of different schools of Force users, just because we don't see that at all in Phantom Menace onward. In Star Wars, the galaxy is so big that it can always be a matter of, oh yeah, over there on that planet and that part of the galaxy, that's where they were.
Yeah, you get some of this in like the Bendu, the
Mhm.
Witches of Dathomir, um, but yeah, definitely by the time a lot of these either sects have been suppressed, died out, or become less prominent, you get the more witches from the Acolyte. But here we have the Sorcerers of Tund who can do like fire types. They're often said to flirt with the dark side. You have the Brotherhood of the Ninth Door who manipulate the minds of the people around them, doing this constant low grade mind trick so that people don't know what they look like and see what they want to see. Uh, you have the Path of the Open Hand, who believe the Force should not be manipulated by anybody, because that will then result in an imbalance. And so, like, if you save a life with the Force, someone else will not necessarily die. Kind of like a law of equivalent exchange, but for the Force. And then many other sects, such as the Church of the Force, which the Guardians of the Wills work for, where it's more of a general, like almost religious institution, more so than like an order of monastic warriors like the Jedi. And the Jedi are just one sect of many, and they're not particularly liked by many of the sects because they're seen as because they have so much power in the Republic, they're seen as throwing their weight around and putting their own traditions first.
It could be really responsible for why these other sects dwindle in prominence.
I think that's definitely part of it. But then the actual plot of the novel, so we have three Jedi masters that are on the planet, Silandra Sho, and two members of the Jedi Council who are trying to. Silandra's just there in pilgrimage, but then she's assigned to investigate it when a bombing happens. And then two other Jedi Masters are attempting to stop the war from breaking out. Each are assigned to one ambassador, and it fails. So each faction lands troops. There's fighting in the streets. People die. So there's this tense lead up to the battle and all the various factions and moving around that happens, and then the actual battle itself, which takes it's a pretty intense like war drama told through audio, where it doesn't pull any punches. Buildings get blown up, people die. It's pretty dramatic, and then the Jedi are trying to keep peace the whole time. We have a nice monologue by uh, Jedi Master Creighton, who addresses it. They use the Kylo Ren technique. He and a bunch of Jedi freeze a bunch of blaster bolts in the air, and while they're hanging there, he starts to implore the fighting to stop to both of the sides, while they literally stand between the two armies.
So interesting. Sounds like quite a colorful way to use the medium in order to depict a war. And one thing we pointed out about the High Republic is that it's this fertile time for storytelling, just because the what's known is not as established.
Yeah. And as an audio drama, it's probably pretty close to like one of those old radio serials. It's told in like areas that's, oh, this is 11 hours before the battle begins. Time until the battle begins at 0 hours when we finally reach the battle. So you're always you're knowing it's going to happen, so it engages into the dramatic irony of how bad is it going to be and who's going to start it. Can they still avert it? Is the story lying to me? The story is not lying to you. But still an interesting way to take it. And again, as an audio drama, some of the voice acting in this one was not necessarily my favorite, but it was all um, understandable. And um, I think I prefer the character-driven ones more, but this one was the most important, I think, to understand what's going on in its respective area of the canon.
Can you predict what direction they'll take for the third High Republic audio drama?
I'm gonna guess either a fusion of the two or maybe more plot focused again, because the High Republic is definitely has a lot of ground to cover in the third phase. So I would guess, even if there are, I guess they would take a lot of the characters we already know and then put them into a new story with a plot.
If you were to, similar to Dooku, adapt a character or some plot beat from, uh, I guess, the later Republic, what sort of story or character would you highlight?
Snoke would be interesting to have him. If I was going to pick sequel era, for prequel era, maybe Qui-Gon Jinn. A war memoir story told from a rebellion shoulder or even like a stormtrooper would be interesting. So I think you have lots of audio drama potential. A political thriller like Andor would also be cool. So I think the medium is underutilized. It's obviously expensive to get all those voice actors together and edit it, and it's harder to consume than like a novel or a movie. But I still think it's a worthwhile medium to explore.
Yeah, and it's not as expensive as an actual, series or film.
Yeah, you can still have everyone go record in their booths and edit it together. So
Right. Yeah, the thought of what happens to Captain Rex could be interesting. Um, Especially if we get, is it D. Bradley Baker who did the voices of all the clones in Clone Wars?
yes,
Getting him back to record some clone content could be interesting.
yeah. So that is the current audio dramas that are present in the Star Wars canon. Our thoughts on them, thoughts on the genre as a whole. I think it's evocative, interesting, a little. I mean, it can be a little uneven because but that's what you're taking a risk with new types of art, and I personally enjoy it.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see what else they develop from here.
This has been episode 82 of Talking Star Wars audio dramas. Thank you for listening.
Till next time.
We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.